listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is July the 30th. The 211th day of the year. 154 days remain of the year's over with. Holidays and observances. Share a hug day. Just walk up to people and hug them. National Cheesecake Day. Oh, whether it's berry or chocolate or just plain cheesecake. You can try making it yourself or visit a bakery or restaurant to enjoy this sweet, cheesy treat. And the Just Cheesecake Outlet here in El Paso is a place where you can find a cheesecake that will absolutely knock your socks off. Then it's Regatta Day, Paperback Book Day. Oh, I read a lot of them. National Whistleblower Day. These are brave individuals who stand up against injustice. The World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. It's basically a hidden crisis. National Father-in-Law Day. National Support Public Education Day. And the National Day of Friendship. Plan a fun day with friends or reach out to old friends to reconnect. National Fishing Month. Faitacon, which is a festival, celebrates was actually in the small town of Dan Sai in Thailand's Lao province. It's a festival with a lively spectacle where locals and visitors alike put on elaborate masks and costumes to transform into playful ghosts. It actually celebrates spirituality. It's also a lot of fun, drawing people together in celebration of local traditions. Kind of like Halloween. National Marine Week, except there's no candy. Festival of British Archaeology. Love Parks Week. Big Butterfly Count. Monitor the environment by tallying butterflies. That's a simple but profound method revealing the delicate balance within ecosystems. Famous people born on this date. Arnold Schwarzenegger. He'll be back. Lisa Kudrow. Phineas O'Connell. Christopher Nolan. Gina Rodriguez. Terry Crews. Henry Ford. Joey King. Lawrence Fishburne. Well, on that note, let us turn to the stories in the news. You know, one of the biggest earthquakes in history took place off the coast of Russia, and it's created tsunamis that threaten Alaska and Hawaii. There's been damage and minor injuries reported after one of the largest earthquakes in recorded history strikes off the Russian coast. In fact, the entire U.S. West Coast facing a tsunami threat. It was an 8.8 magnitude earthquake that took place off Russia's east coast yesterday. Tsunami warning was officially issued in Hawaii, Northern California, and Alaska, prompting thousands of people to evacuate to higher ground. People have been warned to remain off the beaches in Southern California, all the way to southern Alaska, due to potential impacts of the tsunamis. And there's been injuries reported in Russia, as well as reports of damage. Oleg Novikov, head of the regional health department in Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula, said a few people hurt themselves while rushing to leave buildings, and a hospital patient got an injury while jumping out of a window. But all the injured people were said to be in satisfactory condition. Well, the New York City shooting timeline shows that the gunman moved with speed in a cross-country drive that ended with office bloodshed. And of course, the shooter was described as strutting with complete confidence before going in the building and killing 4. Shane Tamura, 27, of Las Vegas, after shooting the people, died by suicide after gunning down 4 people and wounding a 5th inside the building. That's the headquarters of Blackstone and the NFL. The Police Benevolent Association President Patrick Henry said, "Pure evil came to the heart of our city and struck innocent people." On July 26th, Tamura's vehicle traveled across the country, crossing through Colorado on July 26th. On the 27th, he was employed at a Las Vegas casino, but didn't show up to work on Sunday, according to all reports. That same day, his car is reported moving through Nebraska and Iowa. On the 28th, his car was spotted in Columbia, New Jersey. Authorities revealed he drove into New York City shortly after that. Just minutes before 6:30 p.m., security footage showed him exiting a double-parked BMW while carrying an M4 rifle. Crossed an outdoor plaza and entered the building, located at 345 Park Avenue. He was actually strutting when he crossed the plaza, according to the security footage. Showed complete confidence. He was focused. He was calm, almost nonchalant. And he's holding the gun at his right side without a worry in the world. And at the same time the shots rang out, authorities got numerous 911 calls reporting an active shooter inside the building. They began firing and hit an NYPD officer, Didaral Islam, as he worked as a corporate security detail guard, and a woman attempting to take cover behind a pillar in the lobby. And he went to the elevators where he shoots a security guard who was taking cover behind a security desk. Then he shot another man in the lobby, according to reports. Then he called an elevator and allowed a woman to exit the elevator unharmed, rode up to the 33rd floor of the building, and proceeded to shoot and kill 1 person. He appeared to be targeting the NFL, but appeared to have gone to the wrong back and ended up on the floor of Rudin Management. Well, after his rampage, he shot himself in the chest. Well, 2 arrested in that brutal Cincinnati mob attack. 1 was freed on bail despite serious charges, which you can thank George Soros for that. The video of a downtown assault outside a nightclub is circulated widely on social media over the weekend. The 2 people have been arrested in connection with the downtown attack. It left 2 other people seriously injured over the weekend. 34-year-old Montianez Merriweather and 24-year-old Decra Vernon were arrested, although the charges have not been announced as of yet. Well, Democrats did another publicity stunt. They did a sit-in at an ICE office and were basically ignored. Well, Trump's border enforcement's unleashed a new weapon against illegal immigration. AI system now flags human traffickers in real time while ensuring no illegal crossers can release into the interior. Under the Biden administration, it was a revolving door. One thing's been pointed out: President Trump was elected on a promise to secure the border, deport illegal aliens. He declared a national emergency, rescinded Biden-era catch and release policies, and restored a clear legal standard of entry. In June, the illegal crossings at a record low for the second consecutive month. And not a single illegal border crossing was released in the interior. Well, Jets and Commanders players among the young rising stars who just walked away from the NFL. Nate Herbig and Zach Evans, both in their 20s. They were described as experienced but young NFL players. Made shocking retirement announcements. New York Jets running back Zach Evans, 24, and Washington Commanders defensive guard Nate Herbig, 27, called it quits this week. The decisions came shortly before the NFL opened the 2025 preseason with Thursday's Hall of Fame game in Canton, Ohio. Evans revealed his plans to retire Monday and moved to New York's reserve retired list. Finished his lone season at Ole Miss in 2022. 936 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns. 6.5 average yards per carry led the SEC that season. He got drafted in the 6th round in 2023. Appeared in 10 games in his rookie season. Well, Herbig went undrafted in 2019, spent the first 3 years of his professional football career with the Philadelphia Eagles. Had a 1-year stint with the Jets and a 2-year run with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Signed with the Commanders in the offseason, is credited with 30 career starts. You work and you work and you work to get to a certain point, and when you get there, you say, okay, that's it, I'm going home. Well, Coldplay's Kiss Cam moment sparked a lawsuit. Experts say Astronomer CEO case will be dead on arrival. Astronomer CEO Andy Byron and HR head Kristen Cabot both resigned from their roles after their Coldplay Kiss Cam moment. There's been discussions about lawsuits against Coldplay's Chris Martin over the Kiss Cam fiasco, but legal experts say that would be dead on arrival. There are rumors online that the former CEO is allegedly planning to sue Coldplay over the incident. Hadn't been done yet. That doesn't mean it's not going to be. You got zero grounds to sue, but in fact, his lawsuit's dead on arrival, according to employment attorney Ron Zambrano. Had no reasonable expectation of privacy at an event like that. There's a waiver of any such rights at the point of ticket purchase, which is viewed generally as a contract. During the Coldplay's performance on July 16th, he appeared on the Kiss Cam with his arm wrapped around a woman, as later identified as Cabot. Two were shown during Martin's Jumbotron song, where the singer provides lyrics about the couple shown on the crowd. Cabot covered her face and turned away from the camera, while a stunned Byron ducked down and exited the frame. Martin made the joke, either they're having an affair or they're just very shy. Well, it turns out they were having an affair. He was right on that one. Well, Prince Harry's desperate to win back royal family in the latest maneuver of King Charles. Duke of Sussex offered to share his official schedule, and that's seen as an attempt to win back the royal family's trust, while King Charles remains cautious, of course. UK's Daily Mail reported the Duke of Sussex extended an olive branch to the royals by offering to share his official schedule of engagements. This is considered a bid to ease tensions between him and his father, King Charles III, who's battling an undisclosed form of cancer. Fox reached out to a spokesman for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex for comment, but their office declined to comment when reached by People magazine. According to British royal expert Hilary Fordrich, Harry's now desperate. Self-serving gesture is notable, but it won't do much to mitigate suspicion and caution on the royal side. King Charles III is now more guarded than ever, somewhat traumatized by what he considers a string of betrayals. Well, there's said to be a war on hot women. The woke mob is going after Sydney Sweeney. When you cut to the chase, liberal women aren't mad at Sydney Sweeney because she's setting women back. That's just an excuse they're throwing around because they don't want to admit the truth. They're mad because she's young and hot and white and blonde. And they're mad that corporations are waking up to the truth. American people are through with woke. If she was 300 pounds and identified as gender fluid, she'd be hailed as a revolutionary. If she threw her pronouns into every interview, wore a feminist crop top at the wet red carpet and spouted progressive talking points, they'd be tripping over themselves to give her a GLAAD award. But because she just is confident, traditionally feminine, and not bending knee at the woke agenda, she's a target. Basically, it boils down to jealousy. All right. There's been a lot of promises about money coming from the government with all the carrying on. We're going to get $5,000 checks from the Doge. Well, now we're going to have the possibility of $2,400 rebate checks from Trump's tariff money. You know, if all these promises came to pass, it would be good. But instead, they're just promises. Now, there's been a third suspect arrested in that Cincinnati beatdown, been charged with assault. That assault left 2 people seriously injured this past weekend. Jermaine Matthews has been arrested and charged with aggravated riot and assault. Sources confirmed to Fox News that authorities are taking the investigation of the viral beatdown in Cincinnati very seriously. 2 days after the beatdown, 3 people have been arrested in connection with the crime. It was the early hours of Saturday morning. The brawl broke out near the popular nightclub Love and late-night restaurant next to the establishment. Footage of that incident went viral and sparked public outrage. Footage of that brawl shows a couple being beaten up by a crowd of people, with the woman eventually being knocked out cold with a sucker punch. We'll see if anything comes of it. Well, NASA and the Indian Space Research Organization have launched their first joint effort satellite. President Trump looks to skip the G20 summit in South Africa after a viral Oval Office meeting. He previously confronted South African president with a video alleging grave mistreatment of Afrikaners, or white farmers, in other words. He made those remarks aboard Air Force One in response to a reporter's question after return from a trip to Scotland, where he achieved a massive trade deal with the European Union. He said in response to the question, "I think maybe I'll send somebody else because I've had a lot of problems with South Africa. They've got some very bad policies, very, very bad policies, like policies where people are being killed. And that is annoying." Well, the shooting in New York City, instead of being treated as a crime, has now become a political talking point for the left. They're back on their gun control talking points. Well, a schoolboy spotted American Revolutionary warship on the beach after a storm uncovered a 230-year-old wreck. The resurfaced off a Scottish island, courtesy of a storm. First spotted by a schoolboy in February 2024. He noticed the ruins after a storm swept away sand on a beach in Sunday, on Scotland's remote Orkney Islands. After over a year of research by historians and local residents, Wessex archaeology recently identified it as the Earl of Chatham, an 18th century warship built in Chichester, England in 1749. Traveled widely across the Atlantic from Canada to Greenland. Used as a convoy escort by the British during the American Revolution before it was sold off to whale hunters in 1784. 1788, the ship met its end during a period of bad weather near Sunday. All but 56 crew members survived. So that was a kid that made a major find. Well, it turns out the NEA has a secret agenda, which has been revealed in a leaked handbook. They're actually teaching hate and hiding the truth. And it's being suggested Congress must use the NEA's federal charter to end its partisan and divisive crusade. The National Education Association, or the NEA, tried scrubbing its radical 2025 handbook from the internet after its contents were leaked on X. 434-page manifesto. Document meant to guide America's largest teachers union exposed a radical agenda erasing Jews from the Holocaust, blaming white supremacy culture for systematic racism, pushing illegal racial quotas, calling for educational reparations, and attacking homeschooling while ignoring their own failing schools. I've listened to students talk about what they're learning, and compared to what we had to go through, 50 years ago, would be considered PhDs compared to how they are today. Well, another former Biden, what's called the Biden Politburo member, Steve Ricchetti, going to appear before the House investigators in the Comer cover-up probe. Everything possible was done to cover up the fact he was in a mental decline. Piers Morgan can't believe people are surprised by one-trick pony Colbert getting canceled. That show lost $40 million a year with 200 staff members preparing anti-Trump jokes. 200. Well, Piers Morgan was a guest on Fox News Channel's Outnumbered, and he wondered why people can't understand Colbert's show was given the axe, because it was a financial loss and become boring with all this bashing of President Trump. Ratings were tanking, costing the network $40 million a year, had 200 staff members, and very few listeners. Charlemagne the God slams liberal media for ignoring Bill Clinton's ties to Epstein. There are certain people you do not attack, and the Clintons are one of them. Even with all the evidence Hillary Clinton paid for Russiagate, it's hands off. Now, Charlemagne the God, who does the Breakfast Club, on Tuesday slammed the liberal media for ignoring former President Bill Clinton's past ties with Jeffrey Epstein. Interestingly enough, Bill Clinton is my third cousin. He said it's interesting because it's just funny how the news works, because Bill Clinton wrote a letter to Jeffrey Epstein as well as for his birthday. Nobody's talking about that. Epstein had a picture of Bill Clinton in a dress and high heels in his New York mansion. Nobody's talking about that either. He said, my thing is, I don't care who's on the list. Everybody's got to go. Burn it down. Like that's just simple as that. Mutually assured destruction. Whoever's on that list needs to go. Nobody needs to be protecting pedophiles. And a couple of quick stories. Doctors reveal the secret weapon against growing vaccine skepticism worldwide. Australian pediatricians use grounds-up approach to tackle hesitancy and build confidence. Been more than 5 years since it started the COVID-19 pandemic, but vaccine hesitancy still lingers to this day, which is not a good thing. Another lunatic jumped up on a plane, threatened to bomb the plane, and shouted death to Trump before other passengers tackled him. Well, the EPA has unveiled new plans to ditch Obama-era climate endangerment findings. According to Obama and Biden, the world's coming to an end unless we go back to driving horse and buggies. Kentucky Senate hopefuls are sparring over McConnell's ties as race for his seat intensifies. They did a study of all the guests that have been on The View in 2025. Not a single one was a conservative guest. They were all liberal. Most of them spent their time attacking Trump. Well, Macron is casting France as the savior of Palestine. We'll see how that plays out. Well, Pete Buttigieg has acknowledged fairness issues with trans athletes in women's sports. He's joined a growing list of Democrats speaking out on that controversial sports issue. Well, there are a lot of issues that are going to have to be addressed in regard to national security. The problem is nobody really knows what to do next. They say they do, but they don't. The doublespeak by government is very, very clear when you look at our topic for today, which is talking about UFO disclosures. You know, until the change in what UFOs was called began to be widespread, it was viewed as a joke. But the very same information, when you instead of UFO, you call them a UAP, is now looked at very seriously. And it became very evident under the switch from Project Sign to Project Grudge that, in fact, there was a cover-up going on. Now, Project Sign made the recommendation to General Hoyt Vandenberg that UFOs need to be looked at very seriously. They were a potential threat. This one man, this general, said, I don't think so. So suddenly, the same people who said UFOs were a threat began to downplay everything. Hearings were held in secret. And even as Grudge downplayed saucers in press releases, declassified internal correspondence told an entirely different story. March 1949, an AMC memo warned that these objects are foreign-powered, their flight capabilities exceed any known U.S. or Soviet aircraft. That's at the very same time they're publicly saying every one of them can be explained. A weather balloon, a bird, Soviet balloon research was considered, but radar cases showed the accelerations beyond Mach 15, which shattered that theory. Now, the big fear inside the Pentagon wasn't Martians walking down Pennsylvania Avenue. It was a Pearl Harbor-style surprise delivered by a radical new Soviet aerospace program. There was no also bureaucratic embarrassment. Admitting that government officials didn't know what was flying in the skies over this country could panic the public and lead to cuts in congressional budgets. That might affect all the benefits that congressmen got. Grudge had to walk a very careful tightrope, publicly calm, privately anxious, and institutionally skeptical. In the late 1950s, even the Air Force realized Grudge's blanket debunking was actually counterproductive. Reports were still coming in, now tinged with resentment. Citizens and pilots felt dismissed. And the media routinely made fun of anybody who reported UFO. Now, a lot of the UFO sightings are in rural areas where the individuals who saw them usually were wearing overalls. Instead of a considered scientific explanation of what was wandering around, you had Cletus going, it looked like a big booger with legs. And of course, the media had a field day. Well, the January 1951 Inspector General review scolded Grudge for unsatisfactory scientific rigor. So headquarters immediately reorganized the project again, this time under Captain Edward Rupert, who renamed it Project Blue Book. He brought back field investigators. There had been investigators in Sign, but none in Grudge. They had standardized sighting forms and, crucially, popularized the term UFO, helping a fresh label free of saucer baggage might reset the debate. Project Sign showed what open-minded analysis could achieve: correlate multiple sensors, chase leads, submit bold conclusions, even if those conclusions made generals uncomfortable. Project Grudge revealed the downside of mission drift when the study's prime directive shifts from discovery to dismissal. Data quietly collapses. But both projects actually share a legacy. They produced the first systematic threat assessment on unexplained aerial intrusions during the dawn of the Cold War. And I'm very familiar with how senior officers looked at UFO reports. The gunfight that I and my men had with a UFO in the 1970s, I was told if I wanted to remain an officer, I didn't see anything. 2,500 expended rounds of ammunition was an inventory error. They didn't want to hear it. Well, the archives of Sign and Grudge, once buried in Midwest file cabinets, now feed modern databases at the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. When today's analysts map orbiting incursions in their carrier groups, they also look at the Mantell, the Gorman, and Charles Whited plots from the 1940s. These flight profiles overlap with uncanny precision. Technology, of course, has gone from vacuum tubes to quantum processors, but the objects, whatever they are, still outfly the best aircraft we can put in the sky. That continuity forces a hard question. If the mystery wasn't Soviet in 1948, it's not Chinese in 2025, whose technology have we been shadowing for 75 years? Debunking, of course, gets tiring. A fresh wave of sightings and radar events over the U.S. Capitol in 1952 finally pushed the Air Force to take the phenomena seriously again. That launched the area of congressional hearings and public fascination that defines the mid-century saucer flap. You know, on July 8, 1947, Roswell Daily Record carried a banner no editor could resist publishing. Roswell Army Air Force captures flying saucer on a ranch in the Roswell region. By sundown that day, Wild Services disseminated that headline worldwide. Anxious switchboards from New York to Los Alamos were clogged with callers who were certain aliens or Soviet spies or had breached American skies. Army Air Force scrambled to put out a retraction the very next day, blaming a weather balloon. The same people charged with dropping atomic bombs, if it came to that, couldn't tell the difference between a weather balloon and a UFO. But unfortunately for the Air Force, the genie was out of the bottle. Newsrooms discovered a gold mine topic. Flying saucers actually sold papers faster than post-war optimism ever could. Well, the story actually began, as I said in a previous show, when Kenneth Arnold reported seeing 9 saucer-shaped objects skimming over Mount Rainier at extraordinary speed. His account raced through the Associated Press and the United Press. Editors coined the term flying saucer before officials could actually come up with a measured response. Newspapers, desperate for readership in a new television age, splashed saucer sketches across front pages, often beside breathless quotes from citizen witnesses who swore the craft admitted no sound, no exhaust, and performed impossible maneuvers. And that's where you started hearing interviews with Cletus wearing his bib overalls. But in 1947, the Pentagon's public information officers logged more than 15,000 press queries about saucers, 10 times the volume received on the shell-classified B-47 bomber. The Air Force's Project Sign, which later became Grudge and then Blue Book, tried to supply sober statistics. They said most sightings were misidentified stars or weather balloons. Now, since they were being reported by combat veteran pilots, they wanted us to believe that they couldn't tell the difference. Captain Thomas Mantell, who died pursuing a UFO, we're supposed to believe he misidentified the planet Venus. Well, editors preferred drama, of course. True magazine ran a sprawling expose, flying saucers are real, that claimed high-level secrecy even as it reprinted unverified tales of crashed craft. Life magazine, era's most read glossy, dropped a 1952 cover story, Have we visitors from outer space? It was accompanied by a full-page painting of silver disc hovering over Manhattan. Sales jumped 10% overnight. Radio shows, Gladstone Next. Listeners turned to coast-to-coast programs long before podcast, where self-styled experts linked saucers to biblical prophecy or warned about hidden Nazi bases in Antarctica. Of course, shortly behind these shows were Hollywood, with the movies The Day the Earth Stood Still in 1951 and Earth versus the Flying Saucers in 1956, fusing Cold Warfare with cosmic spectacle. Plastic toy saucers outsold model fighter jets in living rooms and embedding pop culture images of little green men deeper than any Pentagon briefing could erase. But behind the scenes, uniformed planners saw a different threat. Soviet bombers might exploit UFO confusion to mask reconnaissance flights over strategic targets. Radar crews reported fast-moving blips. Commanders had to decide. Did they scramble jets or dismiss it as saucer hysteria? The wrong call could risk nuclear escalation or leave America blind. Well, the CIA convened a Robertson panel in January 1953, 4 months after a string of UFO tracks buzzed the Capitol dome and triggered a temporary flight ban over Washington, D.C. The panel's directive was clear. Evaluate whether phenomena threatened national security or hampered early warning systems. The panel's conclusion that most sightings are interpretations was accompanied by a strategic forward. Public interest itself posed the dangers. Mass excitement could clog communications channels during a genuine attack. So the panel recommended a debunking program, encouraging ridicule to dampen the frenzy. When in doubt, ridicule the witness. That was the recommendation of the Robertson panel. Well, the debunk order filtered quietly into network news editorial meetings, while the balloon explanations became near automatic lead paragraphs. Air Force Captain Edward Rupert, director of Project Blue Book, briefed reporters. Senior brass urged him to keep answers dull, almost boring, to starve the story cycle. Genuine unknowns, of course, were stamped secret and routed to Air Defense Command for deeper analysis. The public got stories about weather balloons. Analysts got raw radar tapes. And when the missile age spawned, secrecy wrapped tighter. The 1957 launch of Sputnik shocked officials who realized Soviet technology had leapfrog predictions. Any anomalous track now signal potential ICBM tests or advanced drones. Blue Book investigators found themselves forbidden access to radar data from installations guarding nuclear sites. In internal memos, they dubbed this new barrier White Stork, referring to strategic files were secured behind the Atomic Energy Act. These were cases they couldn't examine officially and went down as insufficient data, feeding critics that claimed the Air Force was incompetent or actually hiding the truth, and they were. In reality, the very secrecy intended to protect the homeland handcuffed the analyst. Needle explosion and Cold War hush-up formed a feedback loop. Headlines stoked public curiosity, official stonewalling, amplified conspiracy theories. Each no comment actually sounded like a confirmation. By 1960, Gallup polls show 45% of Americans believe flying saucers were real craft, up from 23% 10 years before. But these same polls revealed plummeting trust in government statements on the topic. Now, not all secrecy was censorship, though. Some served legitimate counterintelligence aims. U-2 and early A-12 test flights often sparked UFO reports because their titanium hulls caught sunset glints at unheard-of altitudes. The commission risked exposing top-secret assets. So officials let rumors of Martians flourish, better aliens and Soviet strategists reading the true ceiling of a reconnaissance aircraft. Of course, there was a cost. That cost was credibility. When Blue Book closed down in December 1969, declaring no evidence of hostile intent, no advanced technology, nothing warranting further study, editors shrugged. Air Force had spent 22 years saying the same thing while quietly classifying the best cases. Skeptics on both extremes flourished. Debunkers painted every witness as gullible. Cletus and his booger with skinny legs. True believers claimed spacecraft bunkered in desert hangars. And in the middle were millions of puzzled citizens who didn't trust either side. Well, this early tug-of-war between headline-hungry newsrooms and secrecy-obsessed agencies forged the modern UAP landscape. Media ridicule became the stick that kept pilots quiet. Classification became the wall that blocked scientists from accessing real data. The word UFO grew radioactive, unusable in serious briefings, and irresistible to advertisers. By 1970, both sides had dug trench lines so deep their genuine safety of flight incidents got less attention than supermarket tabloids. And that legacy still haunts us. When Navy aviators captured gimbal and go fast on infrared pods decades later, their public affairs officers confronted a dilemma scripted in the 1950s. If they released the footage, they'd invite a fresh tabloid storm, or they could bury it and risk accusations of doing a cover-up. This time the footage was leaked. Instead of UFOs, they were UAPs. And the debate reignited, minus the silver screen Martians, but with congressional subpoenas on standby. Quite frankly, one of the most useless things in the world is a congressional hearing, because the congressmen who don't know anything about what they're talking about spend that time grandstanding instead of doing anything constructive. I know our local congresswoman, who was a friend that I helped get elected, has shown me nothing other than her disdain for disabled veterans. As you navigate through the various shows I'll be doing, keep in mind the intricate network that emerged over these initial years. Dramatic headlines intertwined with confidential memos, each influencing the path of the other. To understand and untangle today's disclosure battles, we have to track both strands. What the public was shown and what insiders withheld. Through decades of radar logs, whistleblower depositions, and black budget appropriations. Only then can we judge whether the unknown lights of 1947 or misidentified aircraft, Chevrolet probes, or the first data points of a phenomenon still unanswered in America's classified vaults. Well, in 1953, March 12th to be exact, Captain Edward J. Rupert walked into Building 263B at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base with a fresh stack of incident reports. The plaque on the door he went through said Project Blue Book, Air Tactical Intelligence Center, the U.S. government's public-facing UFO clearinghouse. And this assignment, of course, looked legitimate enough. Go through incoming sightings, reports, and decide which merited more profound study. Behind the clipboard checklist and orderly file drawers, Blue Book navigated a delicate balance, though, calming a nervous public, appeasing brass who feared Soviet intrusion, and concealing anything too peculiar to explain. Well, when Blue Book closed down in December 1969, we were assured, hand to God, no more UFO investigations. Well, they lied. Now, Blue Book's charter spelled out 3 goals. Determine national security threat. Could these things be Soviet aircraft or missiles? Achieve scientific explanation. If these things weren't enemy aircraft, could science label them as meteors or balloons or temperature inversions? And thirdly, and most importantly, reduce public interest. These exact words appear in a 1958 Air Force memo. In plain English, keep the headlines calm and Capitol Hill off the Air Force's back. And the third objective overrode the first 2. High-level memos show repeated pressures to downplay unexplained cases to avoid fueling flying saucer hysteria. Rupert later said the project felt part Aerospace Detective Bureau, part Public Relations Firewall. Well, every sighting began with the Air Force Form 3292, Unidentified Aerial Object Report. Local air bases, weather stations, and even police departments could phone in the details, which included date and time and direction and duration and color and sound and radar confirmation. And Blue Book clerks put these on index cards. Color-coded index cards. A white card was soon resolved. Airliners, Venus, weather balloons. Yellow needed to follow up. Orange, potential national security threat. Object near a test range or a missile field. And a red card. Oh, the red card. That was an unknown sighting after initial vetting. These went to senior analysts or outside consultants like J. Allen Hynek. Now, Blue Book analysts worked at tables, literal almanacs and star charts and magnetic declination tables. They compared sighting angles to planet positions and cross-checked against weather balloon launch logs and phoned radar sites for corroboration. And if photographs showed up, oh Lord, engineers in a makeshift dark room measured exposure values and parallax angles. Rupert wanted rapid response teams. When funding was available, a pair of officers boarded the next flight to interview witnesses, collect soil samples, and seize negatives before the chain of custody was broken. The budget cuts forced what were known as desktop autopsies. Judgments rendered hundreds of miles from the event site, sometimes weeks later, relying on memory instead of instrument data. Well, they had to bolster their scientific credibility. So Blue Book enlisted J. Allen Hynek from Northwestern University, atmospheric physicist Irving Langmuir, engineers from Bartell Memorial Institute, and their verdicts did carry weight. Most of them were only part-time employees reviewing stacks of cases in addition to their teaching loads. Critical radar data sometimes arrived too late for meaningful analysis. One more time. Final summaries traveled up to the Pentagon's Office of Information Services. And if a case looked like it was going to spark headlines, press officers drafted talking points before the ink on the analysis dried. Several instances, field investigators learned of a balloon explanation only after reading newspaper stories that quoted unnamed Air Force sources. Blue Book logged exactly 12,618 reports between March 1952 and December 1969. The Air Force, its parting shot in a press release 957-69, claimed that 94% had conventional explanations, and that figure became the gospel. But if you look closer, you see a different story. 10,240 cases were tagged as balloon, astronomical, aircraft, or other. 1,677 reports claimed insufficient data, often single witness flights with no azimuth or duration recording. And 701 of those cases were classified as unknown. That's 5.6%. The unknowns were national security hawks and future black budget architects found cause for alarm. Among these unknowns were multiple sensor tracks, Lake and Heath Bentwaters, 1956, where radar and interceptor pilots chased a target executing 90-degree turns. Electromagnetic effects, such as the Levelland, Texas case in 1957, where car engines died as a luminous egg-shaped craft crossed the road. And you've got visual radar coincidence, Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota in 1968, where missile security saw a glowing object at ground level while a B-52 radar tracked a target pacing the bomber at 3,000 miles per hour. Even Blue Book skeptics conceded the unknowns showed flight characteristics beyond present aircraft performance. But internal memos revealed pressure to keep that admission buried in appendices, not hitting the headlines. One 1960 directive instructed analysts to find reasonable explanations wherever possible to prevent unnecessary public concern. In other words, lie. There are two trends that came to light: a huge 1952 spike coinciding with the Cold War radar expansions, and a drop as public interest waned until 1965's mid-decade flap nudged numbers higher again. Unknown percentages never vanished. An Air Force quality rating system graded each case for witness reliability and data richness, levels 1 to 3. Among level 3 cases, which was multiple witness plus instrument data, nearly 30% defied explanation. That's a far cry from the headline-friendly 6% figure that the Air Force touted. According to Hynek, the better the data, the harder the case was to solve. Well, Blue Book's budget rarely topped 5 full-time staffers. In 1963, its entire annual budget, $350,000, is less than the Air Force spent monthly on toilet paper. When waves of sightings hit, the backlog ballooned. Seasoned analysts rotated out. Junior officers rubber-stamped insufficient data. Analysts lacked authority to access radar tapes or missile range telemetry, labeled secret or higher. These files bypassed Blue Book were funneled to Air Force Defense Command. So Blue Book's statistics excluded some of the most intriguing evidence. The 1953 Robertson panel, convened by the CIA, advised debunking sensational cases to avoid Soviet exploitation of public panic. Blue Book adopted the guidance, leaning toward mundane explanations whenever plausible. Critics called it outcome-driven science. And then, of course, we had the technology gap. By the mid-1960s, spy plane programs such as the A-12 and the SR-71 produced flight profiles that could masquerade as UFOs. Genuinely exotic returns risk being misfiled as test flights. Either way, data clarity suffered. These weaknesses sparked internal dissent. Major Hector Quintanilla, Blue Book's final director, admitted in a 1969 memo that current resources are inadequate to assess true threat potential. Months later, the Air Force shuttered the project, citing the Condon's committee conclusion that further study was unlikely to yield major scientific discoveries. But despite the closure of the project publicly, sightings with robust sensor data continue to exist. They just went to a different location, the Special Access Program, or SAP. Project Blue Book was never a comprehensive story. It resembled the public lobby of a building, the deeper floors remaining off limits. Its 12,618 files were vital, but their gaps and 701 stubborn unknowns set the stage for classified successors with bigger budgets and tighter lids. Then the next phase of so-called research, unsolved cases became unacknowledged cases. And while some of Blue Book's own investigators suspected early action had already moved far beyond their pay grade. When the Air Force shuttered Project Blue Book in December 1969, it waived a single document like a medical discharge note, the Condon Report. At 965 pages, it looked formidable. Graphs, equations, case studies, even a glossary. But the core finding fit what the generals wanted. Nothing has come from the study of UFOs that adds to scientific knowledge. In other words, the Air Force was directed to stop looking. Newspapers applauded the verdict, budget committees felt a sense of relief, and the Pentagon halted its public UFO project. But almost from the day it hit print, the Condon Report became a lightning rod. It sparked allegations of bias, sloppy analysis, and even hidden agendas. And we're going to talk more about the Condon Report in tomorrow's show, but for today, we've run out of time. So until tomorrow, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show, saying have a truly great evening. And keep looking up.